Welcome back. President Trump is slamming Democrats and their ramped-up rhetoric following the second assassination attempt on his life in less than 10 weeks. He told Fox News Digital yesterday the suspect, quote, believed the rhetoric of Biden and Harris, and he acted on it. Their rhetoric is causing me to be shot at when I am the one who is going to save the country, and they are the ones that are destroying the country, both from inside and out. Here's Trump last week at the debate. Watch.
This is the one that weaponized, not me. She weaponized. I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me. They talk about democracy. I'm a threat to democracy. They're the threat to democracy.
Joining me now is Trump 2024 National Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt. Karoline, thanks very much for being here this morning. First question, how is President Trump doing after a second attempt at his life?
Well, remarkably, Maria, President Trump is doing great. I was with him for most of the day yesterday. He is in great spirits, and he is more determined than ever to win this election and to fight for this great country. But I have to be honest with you, there's a lot of frustration at our campaign right now because President Trump just nearly survived the second attempt on his life because of the rhetoric that is coming from our opposition campaign, Kamala Harris's campaign. Her mantra, her slogan is that President Trump is an existential threat to democracy. That is a lie. And that rhetoric and that lie that has been repeated endlessly by the Democrats in the mainstream media has led to these attacks on President Trump's life. Our campaign just yesterday put out a release with pages and pages of quotes from Democrats saying President Trump is a threat to democracy. Joe Biden saying that there should be a bullseye on the back of President Trump. Tim Walz saying that President Trump puts people's lives in danger. That couldn't be further from the truth. And their rhetoric has emboldened lunatics like the gentleman who tried to put a rifle through the fence at Trump International Golf Course and take President Trump's life yet again. Their rhetoric needs to stop. The Democrats need to fight this election on the issues, on the border, on immigration, on inflation, on foreign policy. But the truth is they can't, because on every single issue that matters to the American people, they are losing. They can't fight him at the ballot box, so they are using this rhetoric, and crazy people across this country are trying to take President Trump's life, and it is a sad state of affairs in this country right now.
How disturbing. You're not alone. Some people in the media have pointed this out, like myself, others on Fox and Fox Business, The Federalist, including this most recent piece saying that instead of abandoning the assassination prep campaign, the Democrats further smeared him as the next Hitler, a threat to democracy, primary spreader of fascism, and an existential danger to the nation. The New York Post, Miranda Devine, yesterday writes reckless rhetoric from Democrats and media to blame for second Trump assassination attempt. Democrat House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, an hour after the assassination attempt, comes out with extreme MAGA Republicans, we must stop them. So, and yet, what does Trump say after the assassination attack? Nothing will slow me down. Nothing will slow me down. I will never surrender. It's just remarkable to see this unprecedented moment in time. Meanwhile, Kamala Harris is sitting down for an interview with the National Association of Black Journalists today in Philadelphia. I don't know if this issue is going to come up, but Harris reportedly stumbled with black voters, particularly black males, in a new NAACP poll, finding 1 in 4 black men under 50 are supporting President Trump because they say it's economic issues that are becoming too big to ignore. Politico also out with this piece. Harris needs incredible turnout among black voters, but there are warning signs. It also shows less than 50% of black men under 50 are going to vote for Harris. So, Karoline, do you believe these assassination attempts have impacted some of those swing voters?
Absolutely, because Americans are realizing what is at stake in this election, and we are fighting against radical Marxists who want to tear down this country. And we are fighting against people who want to continue with the same broken policies that have created misery and chaos across this country. Our wide open border that has led to an immigration invasion of nearly 20 million illegal people, which, by the way, has particularly impacted minority Americans, African Americans, Hispanic Americans, whose cities are being overrun by these illegal immigrants immigrants who Kamala Harris is giving free stays in luxury hotels and prepaid debit cards to. That is fundamentally unfair to the hardworking, tax-paying citizens of this country who are struggling because of the economic policies that Kamala Harris has implemented over the past 4 years. So I expect and we hope that today, when Kamala Harris sits down with the National Association of Black Journalists, as President Trump did, they will ask the same tough questions that they did of President Trump. The first question to President Trump at that meeting was, why should black voters trust you? Well, Kamala Harris needs to be asked that same question because life for black Americans in this country has gotten worse under Kamala Harris's tenure in the last 4 years as vice president. The media needs to do their dang jobs and ask Kamala Harris tough questions. If she wants to implement real solutions, why hasn't she done that over the past 4 years? How can she be trusted to get a promotion when she's been already the worst vice president in our nation's history?
Well, look, I mean, after the first assassination attempt on President Trump's life back on July 13th, the FBI came out and said, we have reason to believe there will be more. Okay, so they knew that there would be more. That in and of itself should have sparked much more protection around President Trump. Obviously, another would-be assassin was able to get within hundreds of yards of the president on Sunday. Is the president changing any of his plans in the face of this new reality?
Well, first of all, let me say that we are grateful to President Trump's personal protective detail that is around him every day. Once again, they act with incredible urgency and courage to protect President Trump on Sunday afternoon at the golf club. With that said, President Trump has asked the Secret Service for more resources, more men, more protection, considering he is the most threatened man in the world right now. We know that there was an Iranian plot to kill him in addition to the assassination attempt in Butler and what happened on Sunday afternoon. So President Trump absolutely needs more protection. I think all Americans would agree with that. And again, it's up to the Democrats. The onus is on them to turn down the rhetoric in this country because deranged lunatics are being emboldened to truly believe that President Trump is a threat to this democracy, which he is not. And the Democrats know he is not. They are just repeating that talking point because they have nothing else to run on in this election. And it's shameful. 50 days left. Let's fight this election on the issues that matter to voters at home.
Yeah, and what are they so afraid of? What are they afraid of that they have to come out with this devastating, dangerous rhetoric? Look, before you go, I've got to ask you about the crypto move because the president is rolling out a new cryptocurrency venture, World Liberty Financial. President Trump says the mission is all about democratizing access to capital, and it'll enable those who cannot get a loan from a bank to still participate in wealth creation, which is a great idea. But an analyst at Cowen and Company writes this. Okay, Caroline, listen to this. Prospects for an enactment of a crypto market structure legislation that Trump's family launch is doing, if Trump wins the election, are lower if the Trump family launches World Liberty Financial because Democrats will be loath for political reasons to support any bill that is viewed as enriching the Trump family. So the question is there a concern that the launch of this crypto venture will derail emerging bipartisan views on how crypto should be regulated?
No, not at all. The crypto community knows where President Trump stands. He stands with them. He wants to deregulate the industry, provide safeguards for them that are necessary so that crypto can be the future in this great country, unlike Kamala Harris, who wants to put the heavy hand of the federal government on the crypto industry, just like she does all industries. I was with President Trump, Don and Eric last night at Mar-a-Lago when they launched this. It was a great success, and President Trump will be a champion for the crypto community when he's back in the White House.
Well, there certainly are a lot of complaints about Gary Gensler and this heavy-handed regulation that he wants to put in crypto for sure. Caroline, good to see you. Thank you. Caroline Leavitt from the Trump campaign.
You too, Maria. Thanks.
We'll be right back.